this is my primary area of of collecting, and I was introduced to this by a man in the UK named Nick Martin, who's the editor of the Belgian Philatelic Study Society or Circle Journal, and we were looking for something for me to concentrate on, and he said to me, "What are you interested in?" And we went through a bunch of things, and he said, "No, that's not going to help very much." And then I said, "When I was a kid, I always wanted to build a train layout." And I don't have what you would call, I got the musical gene in my family. I did not get the mechanical gene, and I never did it. But this seemed a way to combine my interest in trains and in stamps. So it was a really a natural fit. So we'll move really quickly through this. If there's something you want to know, or please feel free to interrupt. It's great. So here we go. And hopefully you'll still be interested at the end, or at least still awake. So, all right. So just a little background. Belgium's about half the size of the US state of Maryland, or the size of New Jersey, if you know that. It's somewhere between 11 and a half and 12 million people. It's the 22nd most densely populated country in the world, the sixth most densely populated country in Europe. And of course, more importantly, in terms of history, it's been the battleground for a great number of European powers over the last 500 years. And some of those battles there will sound familiar to you. Of course, the Battle of the Marne, all of those. Interestingly, Belgium was one of the early and most aggressive participants in the Industrial Revolution. And we'll look at why that was the case in a minute or so. Now, what does France have to do with Belgium? Well, some things that may come to mind immediately, but Belgium was at one point part of the First French Republic after the French Revolutionary Wars. It was reunified with the kingdom after the abdication of Napoleon. Belgian Revolution led to the separation of the southern provinces from the Netherlands. So the Belgium of the 1830s is Catholic, bourgeois, and officially francophone, which led to some problems that continue to exist to this day because it's largely a Dutch and French divide, as you can see here. There's a small area over on the right, in an area to the east, which speaks German, because it's gone back and forth throughout the wars between the Germans and Belgians and French. So to the north, Dutch speaking. To the south, French speaking. The only legitimately mandated bilingual spot in all of Belgium is Brussels, which of course serves as the home of the EU, or one of them. Okay, new king, Leopold I, after the French Revolution. He became fascinated with the idea of preventing what had happened under the French from ever happening again. So he knew he had to find a way to connect the disparate areas of the country so that communication could happen quickly. He became interested in the English rail system. I don't know if you've actually thought of it. We'll see it on the map, but England and Belgium are actually quite close. So he knew quite a bit about what was going on there. He got excited about the rail networks. He planned what essentially, or his team or cabinet planned what was essentially the first nationally planned rail network in Europe. One of the reasons that he could be so aggressive in the Industrial Revolution was because the French Republic had created a disillusion of religious institutions. And that meant that there was an awful lot of property that either the government or very rich people owned. And that property could be sold to finance a lot of the industrial projects that they were doing. If you collect any Belgian stamps at all, you will know that Leopold I is an incredibly handsome man, as is borne out by this painting, and his son Leopold II did not acquire his genes beyond his obvious atrocities in the Congo. He was not nearly as handsome as his father was. Okay, so development of the railway in Belgium. The first two cities that were connected were Mechelen and Brussels, and that was 1837. You'll see, I'm going to go through this reasonably quickly, this page. We don't really need to talk too much about it. Within 6 years, they had 600 kilometers of rail laid in Belgium. And in 1846, Belgium became the first European capital, Brussels did, to be connected to another European capital in Paris. So it was quite a quick expansion. It was the fourth country to open a railway behind Britain, Austria, and France. It was the first country to manufacture, European country to manufacture its own locomotives. We've talked about the laying of the line between Brussels and Mechelen. This is the actual photo of the first Belgian train called La Belge. The Belgian trains were routinely made fun of by every army that passed through, and they were basically considered percolators on wheels. And it wasn't until the kind of late 1880s that they started to look like the normal European trains. Okay, so here's phase one, 1835 to 1837. Of course, they quickly got the idea if we can connect Antwerp to Brussels, our major manufacturing and port area, that's certainly to our advantage. By 1843, all of the major cities had been connected. There should be a red line from Brussels to Charleroi as well, but if you know your Belgian cities. What was most interesting about this is Ostend in the northeast, connected via packet boat to England, to Dover. They were able to connect to Germany through Verviers and to France through Mons and Mouscron. And of course, to Holland via Antwerp. So it opened up the country to the rest of Europe very quickly. Now, there are several ways to look at this. One was that Leopold laid the groundwork for the national rail system and then said, fine, if there's something you'd like to do to connect some cities in terms of industry, that's fine. We are happy to allow you to do that. Or he was incredibly smart because he allowed these private companies to build all these rail lines, and then he just nationalized them about 12 years later. You'll see how much it expanded. The first national rail line runs from Ghent to Antwerp. And you can see by 1866, there was quite hefty, and this is nothing compared to where it's going to be. It had grown to over 800 kilometers. In 1879, the private lines were reabsorbed into the National Railway, remarkably just before the institution of the parcel post system. So, was it a coincidence? Maybe not. So there's the rail network by 1905 to show you how incredibly dense it is. It's the densest rail network in the world at 142 kilometers per 1,000 square miles. Really quite something. Okay, so what do the French have to do with parcel post? During the first French Republic, a great number of French citizens moved to the Antwerp, Brussels, southern part of the country, and they spoke French. And it had been a French area throughout history, on and off, so French was the spoken language. The big problem was that if you've ever been to a major city in France, Paris or Lyon or someplace, Marseille, someplace like that. If you go into a store to this day and you buy something, they'll say, would you like us to deliver that to your home? Instead of you having to carry it around. And so these French citizens brought the expectation that whatever they bought was going to be delivered to their home free of charge. which was not the case prior to this time. So prior to this time, in 1841, the tariff schedule for parcels that were delivered by the railroad broke things down according to the following breakdown, let's just say. The thing that was important is anything under 5 kilograms paid a uniform tax of 50 cents, regardless of where it was going. The other categories didn't have any fixed charges at all, so they were calculated by distance and weight, but no charge was ever less than 50 cents, and that was a lot of money in 1841. So the high cost of delivery caused the shop owners and customers to begin to fume at the government over why something couldn't be done, and they came up with a system that they hoped would ease the tensions. Now, in a typical governmental sense, this was a very complicated system, as you'll see shortly coming up on a card that was designed to calculate costs. The problem was that if you lived in the city, you of course didn't need the railroad to deliver it. And so these things were put in the hands of private carriers who pretty much determined their own cost. And it cost the merchants a fortune because the citizens simply said, we're not going to pay for it. And if it was outside the city and not far enough for the railroad to carry, the cost in terms of time and the fee was actually could be quite exorbitant, and merchants were losing their shirts on this. Now, my apologies. I know this is a US parcel post horse-drawn van, but doggone if on Google, where you're supposed to be able to find anything, I was able to find a Belgian parcel post horse-drawn van. So just imagine that's not the case. I'm assuming everybody here who's kind of part of the philatelic world understands that parcel post is designed to carry mail, which is heavier than normal letter size. And because of the fact that it's more bulky and heavier to transport, it usually moves a bit slower. So we said earlier, parcel post systems prior to the 1879 system that the Belgians came up with for their country were carried by private couriers. So the idea of the modern parcel post delivery service goes back to Germany. The growth of their rail networks brought about, as much as it did in the US, a universal postal rate by 1857. And so they decided that they could use the railroads to transport more than just mail, but packages as well, and that should fall under the cost, under the same schedule. Belgium wasn't long behind Germany in creation of a state-run parcel post. But the difference was their system didn't rely as much on the rails as it did on the post office to deliver. And alongside the development of the Belgian state-run parcel post, many rail companies, some of which were private companies that we were talking about earlier, also had thriving parcel post businesses. It was less expensive, but parcels weren't prioritized. Okay, so just give you an idea of what early parcel post documents look like. This is quite an early one, 1849. There's nothing remarkable about it. It's just the kind of document that you can see. They're concerned about where it's coming from. They're concerned about where it's going. They're concerned about the number of parcels and the weight. You can see over here on the right, this schedule is consistent with the one we were speaking about a little bit earlier. And you, of course, had to pay for a delivery notification as well. Okay, same thing a few years later. It's a bit more detailed now. We've got the nature of the merchandise. We're breaking down now what it's about. Same information on the top, but you'll also notice that things such as the station begin to appear. And that's because around this time, the Belgians decided that rather than shipping things through the normal postal routes, they could simply put it on designated freight cars and then have the post office take over when it reached the designated delivery town. Okay, this is a petite package, a small package. It's under 3 kilograms. You can see here it's only 26 grams. 13. And down here it says petite on the top to let you know that it's not particularly expensive. It's small, and it's going to the station at Charleroi. Okay, by 1858, things are starting to look, as you will recognize, a bit more as they will when the grand shift comes in 1879. Again, a much more detailed document. A detail, we don't need to talk too much about it, except to say, for those of you that are interested in cancels, blue cancels almost always reflect a private line at the time. So this went out of the station at Liège, but it was delivered to a private line on the bottom. Okay. And last of all, this is a very rare complete waybill from 1867. The stamps aren't present because, as we'll see in a few minutes, they were using regular parcel stamps, but those are regular postage stamps, but those didn't go on the document at this point. So the document was used for delivery and for return to the station, but the stamps themselves went on the actual package. That's a beauty. And again, if you're interested, the blue mark on the bottom tells you that it was also traveled on a private line. So we were talking about how they tried their best to come up with something to simplify the system and make it more specific. Well, here's what they came up with. In the best sense of European bureaucracy, congratulations. That doesn't make it any simpler, and actually can be slightly more vague in terms of distances traveled and all of that. So this also didn't work particularly well, and it was a bit frustrating to people. But what's important is that 1861, they decided to decentralize the post office routing routes and to move those to the parcel relay stations to railway stations. It still wasn't centered in the railroad, but the mechanism was now in place to eventually move it there over the next few years. I love this beautiful cover. So much like stamps, I'll show you in a minute why I'm showing it to you. Much like early mail, you didn't necessarily have to pay in advance. The recipient could be responsible for the charge. The big change in 1866 was they decided that they had to be paid in advance. So just like the mail, it was necessary to be paid in advance. If any of you collect these Leopold I stamps, the 1865 to 67 stamps, of which this is one, these are the stamps that were affixed to the early parcels. And if you've looked at these stamps, you know that some of them are printed on very flimsy paper, and some of them are printed on quite heavy paper. They discovered really quickly that parcels being bounced around on a train and thrown from cart to cart, the stamps themselves didn't survive very well. So the reason they exist on two papers is that the second printing was designed to be used on both postage and also on parcels. We just talked about this, but here is the run of the 5 stamps of this period. You can usually tell the ones that were suitable for parcels, the second printing, because it's on yellowish paper. Okay, changes again in 1878. Parcels continued to be paid by normal postage, but But at this point, it was decided to take them out of the hands of contractors and put them into the hand of the post office. Or out of the hand of, and put it into to put it in the hand of contractors, take it out of the hand of the post office. Unfortunately, no one I know has ever seen an actual cancel on a waybill on a stamp from this period. We'll see a reason for that a little bit later on. The earliest cancels, though, that can be associated with the pre-parcel post stamp system are cancels like this, which don't give a date, don't give a year. They're just simply box cancels to show where things were postmarked. This is a 1879 stamp, not one of the ones that they would have used. Again, I couldn't find a pre-1879 stamp, but I could find a spectacular cancel. So this is the type of cancel that would have existed prior to the creation of the parcel post system. And that's a real beauty. Again, I think what's important here is that the actual box town cancel seems to have originated with the mobile post offices that the Belgians were using. And so it probably was a natural carryover to begin with that. And then there are early boxed cancels that also contain the date. And supposedly, as I say, they can be found between 1867 and 1872, but there seem to be only two now deceased, sadly, old Belgian collectors who've ever seen them, and they've never appeared on the market. So, okay, so the issue's decided. April 1879, they have to find a better way to do it. The newly appointed Minister of Public Works decrees now all the parcels and all parcel post will be carried by the railroads only, which he was able to do because the railroad and the post office was under his jurisdiction as Minister of Public Works. All right, so according to the decree, which says April 15th, 1879, there are basically three classes or two classes for internal parcels. Those 5 kilograms and under, 80 centimes for express, 50 centimes for fast goods. And the important part is that regardless of distance, these were inclusive of carriage and delivery. Supplementary charges could be for insurance for 10 francs, 10 centimes up to a 200 franc value, or 20 centimes if you wanted to be reimbursed for something. Interestingly, the new stamps were placed on sale on May 1st, 1879, which either means that they were working on this, keeping in mind the April 15th, 1879 date of the proclamation. They were working on this for a good period of time, or the Belgians produced stamps faster than any country in the history of the world. 15 days is probably makes us think they'd been working on it for a while. All right, so here we go. This is issue 1, 1879-1882 of the Belgian rail stamps. Basic colors, 20 cents, 50 cents. Sorry, I've got it wrong. I have it backwards. 10 cents, 20 cents, 50, 80. Okay, you'll notice the crest of the country, in the cent, the royal crest, and you'll notice also what is the symbol of the Belgian parcel post, which is the winged wheel. Notice that the printing is all in French. There's no Dutch printing on it at all. That didn't come in for about 20 years. They're unwatermarked and printed on their perf 14s. Just to give you an idea, 100,000 of the 10 centime were printed, 500,000 of the 20 centime, 2,100,000 of the fast goods, but not express, and 1,200,000 of the 80 centime fast goods stamp. So that's one of the reasons that this is such a remarkably interesting area to collect, and also very affordable. Um, we'll see later on, you pay sometimes a premium based on the departure station if it's very rare, but I mean you can get a hold of a set of the first six parcel post stamps from Belgium that may not be spectacularly centered, but the first six of them for about $300, which is still a lot of money, but it's not like buying, US #1 or some of the early English stamps. Now, this is my pride and joy. Um, the parcels were the stamps, the parcel post stamps, were issued on May the 1st, and I'm lucky enough to have a May 2nd, 1879, and a May 3rd, 1879 stamp. So second and third days that they were issued. Incredibly exciting. Okay, later editions with the International Postal Union, the need for a 25 centime stamp was necessary, as was the following stamp that we'll talk about, and that prepaid the service for parcels of declared value in need of registration or insurance. These came in 1881. And then this stamp, which is my favorite, the 1 franc, is just the most beautiful stamp, I think. Love the color of it. 1st of February 1882, and it paid the rate for international parcels weighing under 3 kilograms, and on which no value was declared. Okay, so now you've got the stamps. Where do you mail them? The restructuring of the parcel post system in the 1860s took the posting stations out of the post office and put them in the railway. It worked well for cities where there was a rail station. It didn't work so well for cities where there wasn't. So they decided that it would be possible to post parcel posts in a post office. The parcels accepted in the post office were simply transferred to the rail station whenever there was a suitable number of parcels to be taken. Now, super smart. Of course, telegram is the way to communicate very quickly around the globe. It never closes. So most telegraph offices were largely located in rail stations. So it became possible to post a parcel post package at any time of the night or day, because you could simply take it in and post it at the telegraph office, which never closed, and then it was passed on to the parcel desk, which opened at 7 a.m. Now, there's a reason why post offices, telegrams, and rail stations are important to collectors of this. That is because based on the cancel, you can tell what sort of office your package or stamp was franked in. So round cancellations are in post offices. The 8-sided cancel is a telegraph office, most often located in railway stations, but not always. And then this is the railway cancellation, the 6-sided. So okay. Second of all, to parcel post collectors are the waybills, which we've talked a little bit about. This is just another example of a pre-stamped waybill. Again, you can see there's a lot more in terms of regulations and requirements on it. And 3 francs 60 plus is a decent amount of money for what was being offered. This is my pride and joy. This is in 1882, three years after the stamps came out, right before the second issue came. This is the 1 franc stamp we were talking about, posted in 1882. This is really special. We'll see in a little bit that nobody in the beginning realized that anybody could possibly be interested in these stamps. So when a parcel was delivered, there was a receipt underneath this, which the person who received the parcel got to keep. The stamps and this mark, which shows which by number which rail stations to be delivered to on its journey, were taken back to the rail station where they were eventually audited. And once they were audited, they threw them out. So there are almost no complete waybills. They're probably two or three from the 1879 period, but this is a really early one. And as we'll see in a little bit, there were three different color tabs which were put on to indicate whether it was a fast goods, whether it was express or international service. It's very rare for one of these complete waybills with an international service sticker to survive, because of course it went to a foreign country where somebody thought it was attractive enough to save it, or it ended up in a drawer. So that's why this is so special to me. Okay, so why discuss the waybills? The stamps purchased after 1879 were placed, as we said, on a package. This is slightly later. The waybill and stamp were removed and retained by the rail office until they were audited, and then they were destroyed. What's exciting about the waybills is it's possible, of course, like it is with mail, to trace the journey of a package. And so we can, I have a really good one in a minute, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. But this would have been one of the receipts that the person who got the package would have kept. The stamp had gone back. A lot of people think that the first two issues of waybills are damaged when there's an actual hole in the center of it. But they're not. Like every post authority, the Belgians were terrified that the small size of the cancels meant they could be removed and reused. So they required the offices, when they were taken back to the rail office, to punch a hole or deface the stamp in some way. So actually these are used according to the regulations of the day. A lot of the early ones that you'll find have been torn, the corners have been torn off and just say the stamp and the emblem. Okay, we don't need to worry too much about this. They were printed on white unwatermarked paper, as you can see. This is one that would have gone obviously to France. We can pass on this. It's interesting, but not that much. A couple of things that are interesting about the waybills. Again, the number at the top tells you which station it was destined for. There's a wonderful book on Belgian postal markings and post offices, so it's very easy to tell where it was going. This number was referenced on each document along its journey so that people were sure that it was headed in the right place. But the thing that I really like, this is a much later one, obviously, but you'll find these wonderful stamps or stickers on the waybills. This one shows that it's a wine glass, obviously, and it shows that there's something fragile in the parcel, so handle it with care. There also is the head of a cow, a dog, or a rooster. The rooster is very rare. If you find with a rooster, and it's reasonably priced, buy it, because there are not a lot of those. And then also you'll occasionally find livraison immediate sticker on it as well, which means don't hold it, deliver it right away, because there's something inside of it that's a bit temperamental. Okay, this is a wonderful example of an early 19th century, or just turn of the century waybill. This one was sent from Liège, one of the big cities in kind of southwestern Belgium, to Riga, Latvia, to an arms dealer, which I think is very interesting. It's got transit marks in Cologne, Eastern Prussia, now in the Kaliningrad Oblast in Russia, in Kyatai, the Russian border station, now in Lithuania. So it had quite a journey, and it was received on the 23rd of May in 1903. Well, if you think, how did it depart on the 30th and arrive on the 23rd? Keep in mind that the Russian Julian calendar was in place until just prior to the revolution. So that's always kind of an interesting thing. That is just a spectacular waybill. Okay, so operation of the service. We've talked a lot about this already. We don't need to talk too much about it. Again, this is very rare. It's a blue international document, so it's wonderful to have it. It's quite early. The other two symbols that appear are the yellow one, which was for express, or the purple one, which was either for light packets considerably under 5 kilograms, or for fast freight. So you can tell again what was in it by the color of the emblem. And we talked about that. That's an international one. They're extremely rare and fun to collect. Okay, so once they arrived at the final station, the parcels would be collected from the station, delivered to the addressee. The recipient signed the waybill to acknowledge receipt of goods. They were given a receipt, and back it went to the station. A delivery notification card would be sent to the person who had shipped the parcel so that they would know it had been received. These are actually this particular one is very interesting. Depending on how good your French is, this may be readable up here. Those of you that collect any Belgian stamps know they come with those small little extra pieces on the bottom of them. And this shows the difference between the reasonably secular South and the quite religious Dutch North. People felt as though it wasn't right to make post office employees work on Sunday. So if you had those feelings, you would leave this on the bottom and your mail would not be delivered on Sunday. If you could have cared less whether the postal person observed the Sabbath or not, you'd take your pen and you'd cross this out, and then your package would be delivered on Sunday. When the parcels went back to the to the rail offices, they were audited and franked with this audit symbol to show that they had passed the audit and were of no use to anybody beyond that. Okay, quickly now. Why are the stamps so exciting? Well, I mean, you may not think they're exciting, but why do I think they're so exciting? Well, first of all, there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 different cancels that are used, which means that you could really collect these for your entire life and not have much of a chance of having a complete set, which is very exciting. So we tend to, my specialization is the rail stations in Ghent, which is manageable but still a monstrously large project. So these again are like the ones that we talked about on the pre-1879 stamps. They have unboxed town or unboxed town and date, quite early. They came up with the idea early on that everybody should use a hexagonal shaped canceller like we saw. But of course, some people like their old cancels better. The private lines like their cancels, their hammers or cancellors better. And some places were so far out that they just didn't even want to bother to get one. What's wrong with the one I have? So you run into all kinds of challenges of finding a consistent use of cancel devices right from the very beginning. Okay, we've talked about that. So the study can be divided into the following sections. Now get a load of this. Hang on, I think I jumped ahead there. Okay. Pre-stamp period state lines. Those are the ones we just looked at. hexagons used on state lines, rectangles, postal cancels, telegraph cancels, railway cancels on post and telegraph stamps and not on railway stamps, Brussels and Anvers or Antwerp cancels, private line canceled, colored cancellations other than those used by the private lines. As we said, they use largely blue or red. So there's a lot in the way of variety that makes this very challenging. So the first group that we know on the first generations, again, probably carrying over from the rolling post offices, were box town cancels or box town cancels with dates. Then there's this very strange, what's known as T2, which is a 6-line cancel, gives the city, gives the station, and then as you can see here, there are 5 different arrangements of date, month, time it was shipped, and year. Why there are 5 different arrangements may have had to do with the fact that it was up to the clerk to place the things in, and they may not have done it consistently. It may have been differences in hammers. But again, just that one station in a space of slightly over 10 years has 5 different possible cancels. We won't go over this in any great detail, this chart, but this shows you the number of cancels that were used in Brussels stations in a space of 10 years. I've got a few examples of them. Interestingly, and if anybody knows the answer to this, please let me know. This is the only cancel that has information on it that we're not 100% clear exactly what it means. Some of these cancels you can see are from the same station, but they have different letters or a combination of letters and numbers. People originally thought that it might mean 3 a matin, 3 in the morning, 4 a matin, but they're so consistent that would have meant that packages would have only got out at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. They actually, all the stamps that use this particular cancel use those numbers. So it's quite a conundrum for collectors as those documents don't exist and we don't know why they did that. So future research. Okay, then we get what is, and I promise I'm coming to the end here, then we get what is considered a kind of test cancel. And it seems only to have been used in Brussels in the year 1887. You'll notice that there are no lines to divide the 3 quadrants on here. This is the first kind of square cancel that found, a rectangular cancel that found great use. You'll see what happened the following year. They liked it. It canceled most of the stamps. And so the T5 was issued with these strange little ornaments on the bottom that come in any number of different types, sometimes a cross, sometimes 4 blocks. Again, just for ornamentation. Then we get to the hexagonal cancelers. They largely replace the rectangular cancels. And the good part about these was that it was possible to adjust them very easily. So you had date, you had station, date, time, and year. The problem was, of course, that people aren't particularly careful. So you don't find them consistently applied. And so, as we'll see in a second, they come in an amazing variety of possible layouts. Until 1879, there's a 12-hour clock, morning and evening, matin et soir. And then after that, they go to the 24-hour clock. Gives you an idea. 4 formats of hexagonal cancelers. Here's one that doesn't contain the time. The 4th line down is blank. Here's one that contains the very strange heavy bar, which scholars now think probably was a blank bar to show that there was nothing there, that this postal clerk just simply decided, why should I put it in if it's not there? We'll just leave it out. And this one potentially could not have been pushed in as far as the others. Now you can see this is one that has the morning time on it. Then you get to the really fun group. The city of Mechelen and Malines, they seem to have been the bad boys, as it were, of the postal authority. They have very little interest in putting anything on the cancel at least half the time that reflects anything other than the day. So you'll find about half the cancels from Malines will be missing some large bit of information. Most importantly, usually the designated, we get this century, but we don't get the year at the end. And they seem, Malines is actually quite a large city. Mechelen is quite a large city. How they got away with it, I don't know, but it's always fun to find those. Okay, so this is really just a quick introduction, and those are only the first two issues through 1892. Just to give you an idea of ways to collect this, some people collect by date, some collect by earliest and latest usage. There's a really wonderful book that details all of that. I collect by stations in the city of Ghent. Some people collect by line. All of the Belgian Rail archive information is available online, and so it's really possible to figure out what lines were around at what time and collect by that. There's a tremendous group of collectors who collect hexagonal and rectangular cancels. Some people collect by variety. And, really, I mean, ultimately, it's endless, the ways that you can do it. So anyway, that's the introduction to it. I hope I didn't put you all to sleep and that you're not all, ready to run screaming from the room, but that's that.